Hello, my endless mods. It's me, Mansant, back at you today with another installment in the best of 3 versus series, this time versus Viserai. So before we jump right into it, please go ahead, if you haven't, hit that subscribe button as we're on our way to 1,000 subscribers, which is just fantastic. So let's keep it going. Now, as we talk about Viserai here, the first thing to note is that Viserai is very much a mixed damage type of hero. He loves dealing arcane damage, but it's not quite like Kano would. Instead, he does it in increments of 1 by generating rune chants. And he can either do this with equipment pieces such as Grasp of the Arcanite. He can do this as well with his built-in hero ability, generating rune chants whenever he plays Rune Blade cards. Or he can forcefully generate stacks of them with Read the Runes or off-hit effects like with Mavrian Skies. Or by some other certain cards like Spellblade Assault and Dread Triptych. So he does very much love stacking these rune chants. It helps a lot of his math become really overwhelming if he decides to take breaks, build up rune chants, and then go for a big turn. And we as Levia players really hate this, right? We want to be in this constant trade pattern with our opponent so that we have better math presented on these even trades. Normally 2 cards and 2 cards, that's where our deck shines. But Viserai can basically bank large amounts of damage from previous turns as rune chants into really explosive attacks that are just really hard for Levia to defend with, because she doesn't have that option to just say, oh, it's your good turn, I'm going to block with my entire hand and then just come back at you next turn when your rune chants are depleted. You can't really do that because, of course, once you've committed to blood debt, you need to keep up with turning off blood debt. So this matchup can get very out of hand. The one good thing going for you is that Viserai tends to be pretty card hungry, and that he normally needs a card to pitch. Of course, he loves pitch blues here. He needs an attack to play, something like Consuming Volition, and then he normally needs something to give it go again. So either a Mavrian Skies played preemptively, or if he decides to use Spellbound Creepers, he's going to need another card that would have a go again text on it. And then all of that is going to lead into the Rosetta Swing. So that's like about 3 cards that you're looking at for Viserai to do what he wants to do each turn. And we like interacting with that trade pattern as Levia players, right? Because we have really strong 2-card hands with the Deadwood, with the Endless Maw, with the Dread Screamer, plus the Ghostly Visit, with the Howl from Beyond, and the Boneyard Marauder. There's a lot of ways for us to have really high damage off of just 2 cards instead, so we can get a little bit of advantage in the trade pattern there. Of course, we also have really strong explosive potential with Bloodrush Bellow that can really set Viserai behind, because when Viserai tends to front load a ton of damage, builds up his rune chants, goes for a big turn, he's then very depleted normally. And if we can lead into those turns with our own strong Bloodrush turn, it can take Viserai a lot to try to build up rune chants again and go in for the kill. So we have an advantage in that. But Viserai can also get out of hand in his own right with cards like Mordred being his version of Bloodrush, where he can use these cards to just churn out above the curve amounts of damage per card value and start to overwhelm you, even if he's playing just a fast tempo game instead of building up rune chants. So this matchup tends to be really tricky because Viserai can be explosive, he can be patient, and he can switch the strategy turn by turn. He doesn't have to commit one way or another either way from the start of the game. So it was really hard to track this hero. A smart player can play this hero to just another degree like nothing else. And so these games tend to be pretty fun, pretty stressful, but definitely pretty fun. So let's go ahead and get into the best of 3 and see how it went. Hello, and welcome to the gameplay portion of today's best of 3 video. We see the roll-off here where Tom does win and will elect to go first. This is because Viserai is a deck that nowadays, with the release of Rosetta Thorn and some other newer cards like Sonata Arcanix, can actually cheekily deal quite a bit of arcane damage that you can't end up blocking on turn 1. So I expect that that is what Tom's plan is going to be, to go first here, build some rune chants, perhaps ping me with some arcane, and of course set up that arsenal. Now, I of course would prefer him to attack, because as a Levia player, I always want to fill that graveyard. But as we see, Tom is playing into his arcane damage plan instead, at least for now, where he will be pinging me for 2 with that Sonata. And the Sonata actually deals batch damage of arcane. It's not individual sources again and again. So I can't block both the arcane, which is unfortunate. So the plink damage will come through because I'm only running that 1 null rune piece. My hand is also incredibly awkward here. It is 4 blues, and I hate to see the concentration of blues this early in the game, because ideally in this matchup, I want to keep drawing double blue hands so that I have a really good play aggressively and good play pitch-wise into rune chants. But unfortunately, with my hand of a blue Doomsday, blue Convulsions, blue Avophidia, blue Wrecker Romp, that's already telling me that my concentration of blues is going to be really skewed this game, because you really don't ever see quad blue hands quite like this, especially in a matchup where the blues in particular are so important. So this is a very bad omen, but I decide to go ahead and pitch the Doomsday, because if this game goes to second cycle, that is going to be my saving grace. So I want that as far on the bottom as possible. So I actually elect to pitch that over the Eye of Ophidia, even though the Eye of Ophidia can fix my draws here. And I really think, in hindsight, the one card difference was not worth enough. I should have gone ahead and just pitched the Eye there to try to dig for a few more cards that perhaps were playable as early as turn 1, because what we see here is I'm just not able to do pretty much anything efficiently, at least. With a blue Wrecker Romp, I can at least swing with a Wrecker, but my hand now is an Endless Maw, the blue Convulsions, the Eye of Ophidia, and the Wrecker Romp. So, of course, I want to swing with the Wrecker Romp because it's the most amount of damage I can present, but I do have to take a bit of a 50-50 here, because if I discard the blue Convulsions, that's totally fine. It's a loss of a blue, but so be it. But if I discard the Endless Maw, I'm going to be left without any kind of arsenal target, because you really don't want to arsenal the Convulsions. It doesn't make any sense, especially this early in the game. So unfortunately, I do lose the 50-50, where the Endless Maw is going to get discarded here. So I'm basically saying, all right, well, I don't get an arsenal on my turn 1, and that is a big deal in this matchup. But you also need to play very aggressive in this matchup, because Viserai, especially with these new builds that are using the Rosetta Thorn, can just push out damage like you wouldn't believe. So dealing 6 with that Wrecker Romp, or 4 rather, because it does block with Grasp, is worth taking that 50-50 every time, I would say. And then we see my draws here, and it's once again very strange. I draw into a blue Dread Screamer and a blue Wrecker Romp. So my hand is now, once again, all blues. Oh, and the blue Soul Harvest. So my hand is once again just like nothing but blues. And he doesn't have that many rune chants yet for me to make a ton of use of this. If he had built up, something like 10, 11 rune chants, this is fantastic. But unfortunately, not the case. I'm going to have to block with a lot of these cards, and once again, this is going to affect the concentration of blues that I have in the rest of my hand, so I'm really not happy with how this is going in. And to top it off, this is Tom's Mordred Tide turn, where he has the potential to just pump out a ton of rune chants, but I'm very lucky here in that he ended his turn with an Enlightened Strike, so he's not actually going to bank any rune chants for next turn, and that is fine by me. Because the Mordred Tide could have basically made an extra free 2 damage there, but it's not in this case, because Viserai's ability only procs off Runeblade cards to make the rune chance. So pretty happy that the turn's ending there. It is still a ton of damage. He chose the +2 on Enlightened Strike, so it's coming in for basically 9 total. The 2 Arcane and then the 7 Physical, and I only have that 1 card left in hand. So I have no capabilities of being able to swing back into him this next turn. So my best way to be efficient with blocks is to just go ahead, take the rune chance, and then block with my card in hand for 3 instead of the pitch value of 3, because there were only 2 rune chants coming in. So would have wasted a bit of damage if I pitched it. So there goes my entire turn. I still took a ton of damage, and I'm putting no pressure back on Tom. So this is abysmal from my perspective. But the one thing I have going for me here is that my graveyard is at least stocked now for me to have an aggressive turn on the flip now. I do need to draw any kind of aggressive hand to be able to do that, though, because I don't have anything set up in Arsenal to help me in that game plan. So I am living by the top deck quite a bit here. I also, I'll take a second to mention here, if you look at my equipment pieces, I'm taking the Skullcap just for the extra block in this matchup, because it tends to be very aggressive, very fast, and you can do some cheeky things blocking the Rosetta Swing, or like a Vexing Malice, or like Sonata with that Arcane Barrier 3. Taking Husk, of course, Nullrune Gloves as an Arcane piece. Oh, yeah, look, that's what I was talking about with the Skullcap block. And then I'm also taking Hooves of the Shadow Beast, because since I'm not taking Gambler's Gloves in this matchup, I am really scared to take Scabskins and ever roll it in a matchup that is so aggressive like this. So by taking Hooves, it's just much more reliable in that, no, I will not ever get to do it multiple times per game, but by having it at least active and not having to take Gambler's Gloves, there is a push that I can make in the game pretty pointedly. So that's what I'm bringing that in for, just the guaranteed push, which is what you need in this matchup. You see, I fixed a pitch card there because it was just a bit of a mistake on mine. Didn't mean to pitch a card that blocks. Just fixing that real quick. So looking at what Tom's doing this turn, he went ahead and played that Sonata, and of course hit another 2 cards. Tom loves pitching in to make Sonata hit 4 because he trusts his numbers, and sure enough, he hit. So he tried to deal at least a bit of arcane damage, but it was blocked out with the arcane barrier, and now he's just stacking up a hefty amount of rune chance. So that is not looking terribly good for me. He's now building up for a big turn where, like I said, my blue count is very skewed now. If he was building up a turn like this and I knew that I had a good amount of blue still in my deck, I'd feel better about this. But boy, does my hand just continue to not do anything for me. I had that blue Reckless Swing, I have the blue Convulsions, and then I've got a Hungering Slaughter Beast. And you could say, go ahead and play the Hungering Slaughter Beast, right? Isn't that what you need? Isn't that a tall attack? Won't that help put pressure on? Well, what I'm thinking about here is that my way back into this game is to actually have a really strong Blood Rush turn. And I need to basically buy time until that happens. So if I can go ahead, slow down a bit, set up an attack in Arsenal, I'm going to hopefully guarantee that when I find Blood Rush, it's completely playable. I have that attack, I won't whiff on the Claw attack, and that'll be my way back into the game. So by playing Hungering, it would have hurt that strategy. It also would have started to tick up Blood Debt by banishing, and I don't actually know that I'll be swinging next turn at all. I kind of just want to weather the storm here, make him use a lot of resources, and hopefully just soak up what damage that I can, because Husk is definitely threatened anyway, so this is going to be a defensive turn no matter what. So here we see another Mordred turn. So Tom is just finding all his power cards here. Mordred opening up with that Rune Flash. It is a fantastic start. So there he goes, coming in. I'm going to take, unfortunately, some of that damage because my blue count isn't too great. And at this point, if I'm not pitching a blue, I'd rather just block for 3 with most of my cards because there are some hit effects that are relevant in Viserai, like that Mavrian Skies, where if I let it hit, it is going to create another rune chant anyway. So when he plays cards like that, that's when you actually are incentivized to block instead of pitch because it's free damage for him otherwise. So Tom then coming in with the Singeing Steelblade. Oh my gosh, you can see how much damage Mordred generated for him this turn. It's actually nuts. So Singeing now coming in for 5 arcane total. The Mavrian Skies is giving it go again, and of course we can see how Rosetta is just going to be fantastic to end Tom's turn here. And this is not something that Viserai could really do before Tales of Aria. Rosetta has really helped him cement his place as an aggressive Runeblade now because of how cheap and how threatening Rosetta is. So that turn just really nailed me. Through Husk, through pitching, through blocking, through using equipment, I've been left at 1. And I have to do this now because by blocking with Husk, I must turn off Blood Debt. So my one chance here is to draw discard on the Deadwood. It is not a 6 though, so this guarantees I die to Blood Debt, but honestly I was probably dead anyway if he ever swung with the Rosetta again. So that was a very swift loss in game 1, and honestly I do find Runeblades pretty fun to play against, but sometimes they can steamroll you, and one of the ways they can steamroll you for sure is when Viserai finds double Mordred that early in the game. And it's kind of funny that Blitz works that way, where a lot of cards just have, or a lot of decks have like those Majestics that are just so powerful for their deck, Viserai with the Mordred, Levia with Blood Rush, that it almost becomes a game of who finds their power cards first at the right time. So I just didn't find a Blood Rush at all in a timely manner. That really hurts my ability to put on any pressure. So my turn 1, playing it very tepid there. I'm just going to go ahead, get that Blood Rush, or not Blood Rush, the Howl from Beyond in the graveyard, even though it's not going to buff that Claws attack. It's just a way to guarantee, might as well put that in grave and swing a little bit of damage, and no harm done, right? I also was able to arsenal a red Barraging, which is not the best arsenal card, but it at least lets me early game cycle out my arsenal for a more aggressive attack, where I can play Barraging and pitch and swing weapon for 7 and hold whatever attack I would have played instead to put in arsenal. It kind of lets me set up for blood debt better in a way, if that makes sense, where the barraging is what I want to play first on a 2-card hand because it doesn't turn off blood debt into an attack. So the red barraging in arsenal is pretty safe, kind of like cycling attack card there. Pretty good. But we see Tom once again launching into a Mordred Tide right off the bat. Mordred Tide, fantastic with Grasp as well, because it does count the Grasp pitch effect. So there goes Tom, already generating an extra 2 rune chance from Mordred Tide. If he generates another 1, he's broke even, generates another 2, then wow, card's looking fantastic. But he's coming in with Rune Flash, and of course this has built-in Go again, so I'm thinking at minimum I'm probably faced with a Rosetta Swing, but I don't hate that because it means he'll be out of cards to Arsenal. I do believe. I think he's only got the 1 left, yep. So I'm pretty fine if that's how he just goes with his turn. He's going to be pushing a lot of damage, but I have the chance now to potentially take tempo, and without him having an Arsenal card, I may just be in the driver's seat from here on out because I'm an Arsenal up. Might take a bit of damage, but of course, Carrion Husk can help a ton in evening that trade back out. So I'm being careful here about making sure the Arcane doesn't break Husk. So going to take all that down to 14. It's not a huge deal. Husk's not broken at that breakpoint. And of course, if he does play, I don't remember if this build runs the Defense React that deals 1, but of course I do have a Null Rune piece to protect against that. So coming back now with a stronger 2-card hand, and I do decide to play the Deadwood over the red barraging here, because I have the ability to just cleanly pay 3 resources for 8, which is a bit better than 7 with the potential for Tom to, of course, knock down the attack power. So even though I really like cycling that barraging, this hand is a bit too efficient, deals a bit more damage. So we're going to go ahead with that line anyway. And I do draw discard the 6, but of course I don't want to trim my graveyard yet. So we're going to go ahead, just trim the Mordred Tide. So presenting 8 now. I didn't expect Tom to really be threatened to block with cards from hand, and sure enough he didn't. But I'm still an Arsenal up, and I've basically evened the life, and I still have stronger equipment in play than he does at the moment. I also have the opportunity to use the Arknight Skullcap going into this turn, which is probably pretty strong. It also is most likely a Husk turn unless I'm able to super cleanly block out everything. And then there's also the option where Tom can just decide to play slow again and just build up rune chance, which is always the kind of pivot play that Viserai can make. I'm not sure it's necessarily correct when you're threatening Husk like this, but we'll see what Tom does. What he tried to do right there was actually pitch to use Spellbound Creepers, which doesn't work. You have to have played an attack in. Come on, Tom. You know this. You play Viserai a lot. He's really up and coming on the hero. Plays it locally quite a bit. So that's what I mentioned. Okay, so he does slow down, build up for next turn, goes ahead and realizes the power of the arsenal, the power of building up rune chance. But I'm very pleased with that being the line he decided to take, because this is giving me just freedom to not worry about using Husk that turn, where it could have been pretty low value potentially. So I get to go ahead and lead in with the Boneyard Marauder, where I'm likely to go ahead and crack the hooves on this play. I do believe I actually cracked them on this turn. I forgot to peep my hand, but we're going to see all these cards play out. So the cool thing about the hooves as well is that you can do it reactively instead of preemptively. Scabskins is something you, of course, roll proactively, try to get the action points before you commit to anything else. But the hooves, you can go ahead and see how things play out, make sure that most value possible can be gained here. So when I see that 6 banished, I believe I was going to pop it anyway, but there's always the chance that, I didn't banish Howl, so now I perhaps don't want to use hooves because this extra action point is not going to equate to the most damage it could. So when I saw that Howl hit, I knew for certain it was going to be a high value play no matter what line I went with, but it looks like we're not going to opt for a Howl. Instead, I'm going to set up an Arsenal, or rather play out from Arsenal the red barraging, because it combos incredibly well with Writhing Beast Hulk, and the way that Tom's life is, I have the potential now, since I know my Carrion Husk turn is lining up really well, to present enough damage that any of my next swings will be lethal. So if I can do that and then go ahead and commit Husk on my next turn, I will have the life lead to pressure him to fully block out in the next coming turns. And Viserai is a deck that can get caught blocking pretty poorly, because it does have some 2 blocks in the deck. Not a ton of them, but there are 2 blocks. So if I can get on that front foot, I can really, really tear apart his hands, because Viserai is, of course, another deck. It's kind of the Runeblade theme, where they love these extra cards in hand because they just pump out a large amount of damage, like overvalued, when the larger the amount of cards they have in hand. For Viserai, of course, this is making more rune chance. For Briar, it's the embodiments she'll create. And for Chain, of course, it's his ability to just always use his Soul Shackle super effectively. So there we go. I do swing in 10 for the Writhing, and I'm able to set up Arsenal as well. I forgot to peep Arsenal, but I'm sure we'll see it in a second. So now with Tom, he likely has a decent turn, and as we see here, leading with that red Plunder Run definitely is the start of a decent turn, but I know I'm going to use Husk. There's no way I'm not. I've got that Fate Foreseen in Arsenal as well, that's what it was. That can help me to block out these hit effects that would really mess me up, so, the Plunder Run being one of them. I know the deck, Runeblade just doesn't really run attack reactions, so I'm not worried about saving that Fate Foreseen in particular for a Razor Reflex or something like that. So it's just going to get decent block value. But when I look at my hand, once again, I want ways to present lethal on him so that I can force Tom down to blocking out with a ton of cards. So I get to just block pretty efficiently here with Husk and Ghostly. He did choose Go Again with the Enlightened Strike, by the way, forgot to mention that. So with Go Again, he gets to go ahead, pitch a blue for the super efficient play of Grasp plus Rosetta. So this is not going to threaten the draw with Plunder Run, so I'm not super scared of that anymore. However, there is another 5 damage coming through here, but it's not lethal. So of course I always have the chance here to hold hand. And my hand is a little strange though, because it's a hand that actually won't let me enable Blood Rush. It's a decent hand, otherwise, great hand for early in the game if I wanted to set up Blood Rush, but it is not great for right now in the game. I believe I have, I believe I have the Blood Rush in hand, the Sigil of Solace, and one other card, plus the Fate Foreseen in Arsenal, like we know. I'm going to go ahead and take all the damage here. So this tells me if I just present good damage, I have a good turn. So the reason I hold that there is that I have the opportunity here to banish 3, and if I hit that Ghostly Visit, then I can come in, pitch that Sigil. It's not great, but I can pitch the Sigil to at least come in for 10 off 3 cards. Super inefficient compared to if I'd had a blue to do this play. But that is the reason to hold even something like Sigil there, whereas if I would have missed, I can go ahead and at least use Sigil to heal 3. But here we go, I'm coming in for 10 when Tom was at 10, or only had 6 life left, so it was definitely over-presenting lethal. But we see now that me being on the front foot makes this Fate Foreseen in Arsenal a little bit awkward. I had the option to play it last turn instead of blocking with the Ghostly, but I was holding it in the fear that he perhaps had another attack coming instead of just the Rosetta, because I don't want that Plunder Run to hit. So I held it, and I perhaps am a bit punished here, because now if he's constantly on the back foot, that is just a lost Arsenal zone, because it's not ever going to be super efficient to block with anymore. So I'm checking my banish, because I have ways to sink cards into, or sink resources into damage, with that Howl from Beyond, of course. So I'm looking at my hand. I do believe it's Doomsday, Red Barraging, Red Endless. I got the Fate Foreseen in Arsenal, like I said, and then that last card I unfortunately have not seen yet. But what is the sad part, though, about not having Scab Skins is that in a position like this, I have the option to potentially play Doomsday and just always roll from here on out to swing 6 every turn. And that would be amazing. But when you're running the hooves, you don't get to make those lines anymore, so Doomsday does lose a bit of value. It's not horrible to summon Blasphemous. He's definitely still very strong, but what can happen in this matchup is that you just don't end up using him a ton if you're on the front foot. If you're on the back foot, he's really good because now you get to use 3 cards however you choose, right? You have 3 cards where you can either block, pitch, you just need to keep 1 to swing Blasphemous and turn off Blood Debt. So it can help when you're behind, but when you're ahead, it's probably better to sink your blue somewhere else. So that's what we did here. I'm going to go ahead and come in with that Endless Maw for 12 because there was 0% chance to miss on the graveyard. I believe I only had 2 misses. It was the Ghostly and then adding the Howl in there. So coming in for 12 on this Endless, really, really strong. Because if I've caught Tom on any awkward 2 blocks, he's going to have to commit equipment in there. So it looks like he's preemptively throwing the Skullcap in, but may want to reevaluate that because I'm seeing at least 1, 2, 3 blocks in there. Or he just full blocks and tries to stall me out. This is something he most likely can't do effectively, but you might read as the opponent here that, oh, I didn't banish the Howl from Beyond. I don't have a way necessarily to just instantly fill graveyard again. Maybe if I just take another turn blocking, then my Levia opponent will not be able to swing an attack in. But I know my deck has plenty of ways to burn cards instantly in a grave with the Sigil, the barraging. So I'm, of course, hoping that's not it. And I do have, of course, that red barraging actually from last turn. So I just know that that will not be the case. So with the blue here, Tom's doing what he can, presenting 3 damage with the Grasp and then Rosetta. And it is split a bit. So not the easiest to block. It's almost like a Kodachi in a way, where it's a ping of 1 and then 2. It's almost what Ira can do. Look at that. But I do have the option here to at least put cards back into the deck to block that Arcane and not just fatigue myself out blocking with a real card from hand. So we see my turn. Once again, it's very strange. I have that Sink Below in hand plus that Fate Foreseen in arsenal. I have the red barraging, I have a blue Dread Screamer, and I have a Beast Within. So I want to just cycle this hand a bit, try to find a bit of a stronger play. I've definitely got the 3 cards I need in graveyard here. With that Sink Below, I now will be able to play the Dread Screamer, but it is a blue Dread Screamer, so you'd almost hope that I had a better play than that. Doesn't seem to be the case per se, though. So I'm trying to see what that other card I drew, what was it? I've realized now that even with better lighting, my sleeves are like getting quite scuffed from how much I play Levia. So I may have to switch over to non-glares or something to try to help with that. And also just hold the cards a little bit better still. Clarity could always help. So we're going to go ahead. Yep. And oh, that's what I cycled into. I remember this. It was a Reckless Swing. That other card is a Reckless Swing. So my cheeky play now becomes either try to just sit on the Reckless Swing and that way make it where if Tom ever attacks, he loses. But it can be pretty obvious that I'm sitting on a card like Reckless Swing if I just end my turn here on the Blue Dread Screamer, because there's no way I shouldn't be able to at least play the Ghostly Visit, right? Like, even if I have a red in hand, I can pitch the red to come in for 4. There's just no way I don't. So the consideration now becomes, do I hold a Reckless Swing and make it very easy for him to read that I have it, and perhaps that just changes how he plays the game entirely and just builds rune chance until he maybe can present lethal on me? I don't think that would necessarily work, but that's a consideration. I can also sink the Reckless into just 7 damage, which feels pretty good. Now, I don't get to fill up my graveyard with any 6s this way, but by now, I'm thinking I have not seen any Blood Rushes yet. I've dug through my deck a little bit extra with that Sink Below, so I'm most likely going to see one, and if I do, that will fill my grave with 6s. So that's the other line, and I do get rewarded for going with that line. I see the Blood Rush with a blue, with 2 beautiful 6s. discard that Hungering. I'm able to draw up, and this is always going to be game. There's no way you can full block a turn like this, where I'll be coming across really strange breakpoints, normally at the minimum the 2 claws, and then of course any other attack is going to do it. And yep, sure enough, there we go. I've got the dream set up there, ending the game on the Blood Rush. So, hard call, either hold the Reckless and try to just win that way, or perhaps holding that extra card really will mess with my capabilities of finding cards that I need to turn off Blood Debt or filling grave with 6s or whatever it be. So, interesting call in the end, but I was rewarded by just knowing my deck very well and knowing that if I haven't seen some of these power cards, especially with a little bit of the extra digging I did, they're bound to be coming in the next couple, or in the next hand or so. So, just presented my damage, gave me another free turn, and won me the game. Now we see in game 3 here, Tom choosing to go first. He's pitched into Sonata quite heavily to go ahead and reveal 5 there, x equals 5. So he now is going to add 3 cards, or no, 2 of those cards rather, to hand, which of course is going to ping me for Arcane. Also, forgive the life, he will tap that up to 20. He should be definitely at 20 right now. So that'll get fixed in a sec. There we go. So he's going to go ahead and add those cards to hand. I believe it was a Singeing and a Vexing. I already forget. But when Tom goes first and pings a bit of free damage, of course that hurts me because I want ways to fill grave to potentially go as aggressive as possible. But looking at my hand, I actually have, of course, with that red barraging, a decent turn 1 play at least to either force him to slow down or push through my own good amounts of damage while filling grave. So I don't hate already this hand going into my turn 2, and if he attacks, of course, even better. But nope, he's learned his lesson these days. He's going to go ahead and just arsenal. So then, as I draw up here, my 4 cards become Blue Convulsions, Red Barraging, Blue Wrecker, and Red Dread Screamer. And I think this is where I start to make a misplay. You definitely want to hold on to these blues because of their pitch value early game. So I do believe the best play there was actually just play the barraging red, pitch in one of the blues to swing claws, because no matter what, you're trading either more damage or the same 2 cards as you would be playing Wreck-A-Romp this way. And I would get to guarantee hold the Dread Screamer in Arsenal. Doing it the way I did made it a 50-50 as to which card I'd keep in Arsenal. I mean, they're both quite decent, the Red Barraging or the Red Dread Screamer. And it also does fill my grave by an extra card. So the play there being, do I want to guarantee the Dread Screamer in Arsenal, or do I get the extra card in grave? So I think perhaps it was actually correct to just go for the barraging, but choosing this line and hoping that discarding a Red Dread Screamer doesn't punish me, but that tends to be one of the better cards in your deck. So taking that 50-50 to lose it, I think was a bit too much of a gamble. So we'll see if that bites me. As I draw up, I've got Endless, Yellow Hungering, Sigil, and Blood Rush, with, of course, that Red Barraging in Arsenal. So once again, this is not a strong Blood Rush turn. There's just not an efficient way for me to play it. I don't want to play it without an attack in Arsenal just yet. So I'm just not going to be able to play as explosive as I want. But if I can burn down this hand, which I definitely can, because I can pitch into Swinging Claws, I can play the Sigil, I can Arsenal that Blood Rush, go ahead, play the Barraging. If I can trim this entire hand down again, then I help dig myself towards the cards I want, which in this case would be some blues, some 6s. I won't be able to set up an attack in Arsenal this turn, most likely, unless I go for, in fact, potentially better line here, which, I remember this. This is actually what I end up doing. So because I'd be ending turn with either an extra card in hand or by pitching really awkwardly, what I'm actually going to try here is play that Red Barraging, perhaps slow him down quite a bit, or deal a lot of damage. I'm going to pitch the Yellow Hungering to swing the Mandible Claw for either +4 or not. So it's either 7 or 3. Fantastic number, because of course if they put 2 cards in front of this, it feels so inefficient for them. But really they've blocked 7 for 2 cards, so it it tends to be worth it. It's like turning every one of your cards into a defense reaction. I would say it's worth it, but of course it also slows down their turn quite a bit. So by doing it this way, I'm actually playing super cheeky, where I have the ability now to arsenal the Endless Maw instead of the Blood Rush. And that way I can just hold the Blood Rush in hand. And if my turn looks good enough to play Blood Rush, I have the attack and arsenal I want anyway, which is going to decrease my variance in what I discard. Whereas if I had the Blood Rush and arsenal over the Endless, that could discard the Endless. So don't necessarily want that. Endless is a great ender to a Blood Rush turn, and especially with my life lead now, I have the option most likely to just play a full hand Blood Rush, perhaps committing some equipment. He's definitely going to be hitting me for quite a bit this turn with the arcane damage. And it is just going to be a lot. Consuming Volition, of course, really punishing card if you decide to just not block. But I have Carrion Husk, so that card can really bail you in situations like these. Because I don't necessarily want to commit cards to consuming. It kind of does its job double fold, where it'll make you block it or discard anyway. So I'm going to just go ahead and commit the Husk. Husk is going to prevent the hit effect from consuming, from making me discard a card. It's also going to prevent the hit effect of Mavrian Skies, which is fantastic, because that's a yellow Mavrian on a Mordretai turn. So that would just be horrible. He's going to go ahead, though, and use the chess piece there, Aether Ironweave, to push his damage as far as he can this turn, and swing for another 6 total with those 2 rune chants and that Rosetta. So this is no longer threatening like a massive breakpoint for me, because I've gone ahead and used Husk. So now I'm just going to look at my hand and try to determine what is the most optimal play into this Blood Rush turn, because you bet that I'm going to play it. I have got that blue in Doomsday to pitch. I've got the Blood Rush to play. I've got the Endless Maw in Arsenal, and then I have 2 other 6s in hand. Don't quite remember which ones they were, but of course, it's all fine. So I decide there to block with Hooves, so that I go ahead, and if the scenario comes up where I banish a 6 and actually want to use Hooves as early as this turn, it's there for me. I do lose a bit of extra life, because I could have gone ahead and blocked with the Skullcap instead. But just keeping my options open is what I'm thinking about here, because I know that this turn is just going to be unfair in the amount of damage that it's going to pose. And Tom does not have an arsenal, so this is really going to steal a lot of tempo as I drag cards out of his hand. He doesn't have Rune Chance either, so it's just looking great for me in this game. Coming in then with Claw for 5, go again. I actually did not draw any blues with that Blood Rush, so I don't have the best amount of damage to present this turn, but it's at least a lot, right? Of course, another blue would have turned into another 5 damage to cap the turn off with that Writhing, but can't swing that Claw in the middle, unfortunately, with what I drew. It's still decent damage. So then I get to come in with Writhing for 8 Dominate, so at least a good amount of damage is going to get pushed this turn, and I really doubt that he's going to present lethal on me at all, because he doesn't have Rune Chance built up, and he's already used his Aether and Ironweave, which can really help when you're low on cards and still want to present a lot of damage. So still going to have dealt a huge chunk. I still have that arsenal target of Endless Maw to set myself up for whatever I may draw in the next hand. I will guarantee to have a strong, tall attack. It may even let me use Hooves. And of course, if I draw another Blood Rush, then that's leaving my options open. I no longer need any additional setup. I just have what I need. So even though it was more damage that turn to pitch all 3 of those cards to go for Endless Maw instead of the Writhing Beasthulk, by going for the Writhing Beasthulk instead, I've preserved my arsenal to open up my hand for better draws next turn. That's exactly what happens here. I have a blue Wreck-A-Rump, blue Reckless, red Dread Screamer, and a Blood Rush. So by keeping that attack in arsenal, I've opened myself up to playing a hand like this, most likely for lethal. Because Tom's going to do what he can to present 10 at me, but I really doubt it's going to happen. In fact, I'm just going to say it is not happening at all. Viserai tends to be a deck that if they have 0 Rune Chance going into their turn, they're not that likely to deal more than like maybe 8 that turn, because they tend to do an attack with some kind of go again into Rosetta, which ends up being around like 8 to 9 damage off of like 3 cards or whatever it is. So really not expecting much, and sure enough, his turn is just nothing special. But my turn, as we know, is fantastic. I've left myself open for it, so I get wildly rewarded here, and no matter what I discard, I will at least have a attack. By discarding the red Dread Screamer, I've kept the blue Wrecker Romp, which allows me to go ahead and probably swing both claws this turn. So coming in for 5, go again, right off the bat. It's always scary when you don't hesitate to just go ahead, swing that first claw. It means there's always something else coming. And yep, sure enough, there we go. We've got another 5 go again coming in. And then even though I drew 2 reds, this is enough to go ahead and let me play that Endless Maw, most likely for 11, which is just going to completely overwhelm his capabilities of blocking and most likely seal the game. Most likely. And what I should be watching for here is how Tom blocks this Mandible Claw, because if he goes down to at least 5, then I should be clear to end the game with Endless Maw, because that tells me that even if he blocks 6 from hand, which is the most he can block here, he doesn't run defense reactions, I will win off the Endless Maw, but I don't make that read for whatever reason. And just decide to go with the Boneyard instead. That way I preserve an attack in arsenal and better spread my threats out with the hooves for next turn. So I'm a bit playing with my food here, because I definitely had lethal by just going for Endless Maw, because I don't think it could whiff. Actually, perhaps it could have whiffed. So I guess I'm playing around that. I should have checked my graveyard here. I think I only have 2 misses. I had the double Blood Rush, but there may be another miss in there actually. So I need to find a better way of tracking that for stream, honestly. I could just fan out my graveyard every turn. So instead, I then go for that line, which we saw. I get to draw up here. And with hooves available to me here, I do still have a really strong play, because I've got the Math Break in Endless Maw already, where I can spend 2 cards to swing 9. And then most likely, if I do anything else to swing like 6, which is pretty standard Levi damage, I've broken Math yet again, presented 15 this turn, and he will die. So yeah, so actually the Endless couldn't have missed there, because I believe all I had as misses were the Blood Rushes by the looks of that. Yep. So like I said, little mistake, but still going to take the game here, I do believe, because this is a Math Breaker if I've ever seen one. Sacking the hooves gives me that action point, and Tom can see the writing on the wall. So it is coming in for 9, and with my hand here, I have the option of closing Combat Chain coming in for Hungering, but with the amount of cards he goes ahead and blocks with, I'm now open to the Barraging Beatdown play, which I love doing this. Go ahead, that last card right out of their hand, and that way that 4 damage always lands. It's fantastic. What a tight matchup though. Viserai can really go so many ways. Hope you all enjoyed.